Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Veronica Studsgaard. I'm the co-founder and CEO of IAMTN. For those that don't know much about IAMTN, we are a leading non-profit organization representing payment institutions working in the money transfer industry. We work closely with governments, regulators, regional associations, private companies to promote the creation of safer, reliable, and efficient remittances. On behalf of IAMTN, I would like to say thank you very much to all our members because they've been supporting us, especially during this very special year, as well as you all know, IAMTN and all its work is purely funded by its members. So we want to say thank you very much for keep on the support. And those who are not a member, I will encourage you to consider becoming a member. This is our 5th webinar on a series of webinars that we started during 2020, where we highlight the views of the private sectors and we discuss it with the stakeholders themselves. During the webinar today, we will be discussing what happened during the year, the impact of the pandemic had on remittances, volume, on pricing, on innovation, digital transformation. We will also cover predictions from the World Bank and predictions for 2021. For this panel, we have Matt Oppenheimer, CEO of Remitly, Richard Muriithi from MTN, Ahmed Alenazi from STC Pay, Sophie Krishnan, Worldremit, and of course our moderator, Mohit Davar, chairman of IAMTN. If you have during the webinar any question, please you can type them on the box that you have on the panel. And we will see the questions and we will bring those questions during the conversation. So Mohit, I leave it up to you.
Great, thank you, Veronica, and thank you everybody. A very warm welcome to everybody that is joining the IAMTN webinar. Actually, I guess it's our last one for the year, and what a year it has been, boy, for everybody in a lot of different contexts. And some of the challenges still continue given the various lockdowns that we're starting to see all over the place, but a lot of hope as well as we get into the vaccines and also for our industry. You know, it has been a tremendous year, and I think while remittances may have shrunk in dollar terms, 7% or so as you look at the World Bank estimates for this year and another 7 or so for next. But I think in some ways they grew many folds in terms of importance, especially as they generated a lot of interest with the highest level of governments across the world, UN organizations. I mean, IAMTN is participating in a number of call to action to address. And I think these webinars to get leaders from the industry talking is sort of part of that. So Veronica has just introduced our panelists, and what a great panel we have. And I thank them for joining all the way from West Coast to Saudi Arabia to UK to Africa. So we really tried to cover the world. So very warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Before I hand over to the panelists and ask them to give us an overview of their company, I think let's do a quick audience poll because it'll be great to get a sense of where everybody is calling from and which organization you belong to. So Veronica, maybe if you can launch that poll. Weighted towards remittance service providers, which is not a surprise, I guess. So I think we can close it, Veronica. We've got about 80%, but it just gives us a sense. So, and I think particularly for our panelists, as we get into the discussion, they'll be able to also see who the audience is. So thank you, everybody, for doing this. We share the results. I guess everybody can see it. So Veronica, we can close the poll. Okay, great. So now let's get on with the crux of our webinar. So if I could ask the panelists to sort of take sort of no more than 5 minutes each if possible, please, and just introduce and give an overview of your company. Not that any of you really need an introduction, I know, but just it's always good to hear from the horse's mouth. So Sophie, maybe I could ask you to kick us off.
Sure. I'll introduce Worldremit first, and then a touch about myself. So, Worldremit, to give a bit of context, it's one of the largest cross-border digital payment services. It was started about 10 years ago with the aim to make the customer remittance experience easier and cheaper for customers. We've grown into a business now, sending from about 50 sender countries, so the likes of Australia, US, to over 140 receive countries. We have 100 million users globally, and the customer experience with Worldremit is predominantly digital. So the pay-in is digital, and on the payout, it's a mix globally of mobile money accounts, bank, cash payout, and airtime. So that's Worldremit. Personally, I started my career in private equity and strategy consulting, and I was always fascinated by how companies get to transform entire industries. So in the last 10 years, I've had a chance to work with some of those companies, growth companies in tech. I've been part of the digital transformation of travel at Expedia, the rail industry, and now international payments. And my biggest surprise actually with international payments was coming in the very low penetration of digital in an industry where a digital customer experience make a lot of sense. The other critical element that I thought was great to be able to lead a transformation is to lead a transformation, you need a fairly dynamic customer group, and people who send money back home are in general extremely dynamic. They live in different cultures, environments, they tend to grasp opportunities. And so I love our customer group. So I feel blessed. Worldremit has had 10 years roughly of hard work. It's built one of the best networks for remittances globally and one of the most digitally advanced. And now looking into the next 10 years.
Great. Thank you, Sophie, for that. Matt, maybe I could go to you next, please.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Mohit. So Matt Oppenheimer, co-founder and CEO of Remitly. I'll start similar to Sophie with the company, and then I'll circle back to my background. So Remitly is, our vision is to transform the lives of immigrants and their families by providing the most trusted financial services on the planet. Similar to what Sophie mentioned, our customers are amazing, and we're very mission driven and as I said, focused on improving their lives. We have served over 3 million customers around the globe. We send between 1,000 corridors, so about 20 send markets and about 80 receive markets. We have also been around for about 10 years. Shifting to my personal background, I lived in Nairobi, Kenya, where I was running mobile and internet banking initiatives for Barclays Bank Kenya. And I saw how painful it was to send money internationally. I saw how important those funds were to a lot of my friends in Kenya. And so I moved back about 10 years ago to start that vision. And it's been a great journey over the next 10 years. And similar to Sophie, we're looking forward to the next 10.
Great. Thank you, Matt, for that. Ahmed, if I could come to you next.
Yeah, sure. Ahmed from STC Bay. STC Bay is mobile wallets in Saudi. I see some of the question, one of the question, a guy asked, there is nobody from the Middle East. Here we go. This is STC Bay, the largest mobile wallets in the region. We started in 2018, but the official launch to public was in end of 2018. Now we're serving more than 4.5 million users. We provide various services from sending locally using phone number to remittance. As you know, the Saudi and the Middle East in general, or specifically the GCC, is collectively the highest remittance market. And we have moved roughly 24 billion Saudi riyal in the past 18 months. And this is not a small amount. And we did this with the ambitious to make things easier, smoother, and faster to customer, where they can send money back to their homes and family and friends within seconds. And also they can amend the transaction easily and track the transaction using our partner Western Union rails. So we did that by changing the user experience and focusing on the customer feedbacks. Today we are proudly serving our customer, and we are growing with that. As Ahmed, I joined STC Bay before the inception to create that company, along with a couple of friends. And before that, I was working on remittance. I was managing one of the remittance arm for one of the Saudi banks for a couple of years, and this is who I am.
Great, thank you, Ahmed. Thank you, Richard. Please.
Hi, I'll do the same as Sophie. You started a good way of introducing. I'll start with company, then I'll go to self. MTN, I don't think needs an introduction within Africa. We're the largest mobile network in the continent. We are live in 16 countries. We have over 720,000 agents at this point across Africa, who we use to cash out and to pay in for mobile money. Our services are available on USSD app, virtually any way you can use a mobile phone and the internet. We are available on that. For MTN, it's very self-explanatory how we are. We're trying to grow payments on our mobile network day to day. So different in the many products and the remittances that we offer, from P2P payments to merchant payments to banking and services to lending. It's a whole bouquet of services that we offer across the continent and on mobile money. Myself, it's good to hear, Matt, you worked in Kenya. I'm Kenyan. So as part of the digitalization journey, I've grown up with it. I began my career at the central bank as a regulator. So I used to regulate mobile operators first. I learned it, I understood it. Then I moved to the biggest mobile network in Kenya at that time, which is M-Pesa. And I headed the remittance portfolio there. Now it's called M-Pesa Global. It has grown to a monster that it is. Then after that, I came to head digital payments, to head cross-border payments and remittances at MTN Group. So that's a brief introduction of myself.
Thank you, Richard. So Richard, you said you were a regulator in Kenya. Maybe you drove Matt to setting up Remitly, which
no, he's done a good job. I would say this, sir. This year I have seen great job with what we have achieved with Remitly and Worldremit so far. In the course of this last year, I think we'll talk about it more as we move on, has been nothing but fantastic.
Great.
If I would want them to share the figures themselves, so I do not steal
we would all love to hear their figures, but we'll leave that to them as we move on. But thank you for that introduction. So I think let's dive into our first topic, which is, clearly the pandemic has had a huge impact on not only our lives, but obviously in the remittance industry, which is really what we're going to focus upon. And we all sort of talk about the new normal. I guess what I'm really interested in from each one of you is, how has the pandemic affected, whether positively, negatively, your respective businesses, and how you've had to adapt. And I guess more sort of also looking forward as to how this has made you change perhaps, or what the new normal may look for you as you go into 2021. Would be great to get your views. And again, anything you can share in terms of any data points without getting into any confidential information, I think would be great to give our audience some sense of, the trends that you're seeing. So, Sophie, again, ladies first, if I can ask you to kick us off, please.
I think most of the changes and trends that we've seen this year are here to play. They're here to stay, sorry, and some of them will accelerate. I think we could look at it from where's the growth coming from, and then also how has it affected customers, and then I can talk briefly about how it has affected our teams and how this is what this means for the running of the business. So looking at the growth first, I think many people have seen this now from the World Bank, but overall, I think remittance has proven to be a lot more resilient than many had anticipated. And this is because remittance is one of the last things that customers cut, even when they're in financial difficulty. So it has proven to be quite resilient. We at Worldremit have seen significant growth this year. There was always a general transition toward digital remittance and electronic payments, and that change has accelerated this year significantly. We've seen, and you've seen this across quite a few players, this year has condensed in a few months the growth that we would have seen probably in a few years. So we've experienced significant growth, and both in how the business has grown, also how many new customers have joined Worldremit, and we've seen also a growth in the average transaction value of customers, so how much they actually send home. From a growth perspective, looking forward, I wish I had a crystal ball. We'll have to see. I think the big question for next year is whether the global economies will be able to be as resilient next year as they were this year. Because if you look at the US, you look at Europe, they will have to pay later the cost of having supported their economies during COVID-19. And the question is how much of that will carry into 2021 and 2022. So that's from a growth perspective. Looking at customers, I think those customers who are coming to digital channels, they tend to stay with digital. So it's likely a transition that will be staying and accelerating. They're coming into, what it has changed for a business is having an influx of new customers this year. It's definitely made us improve our customer onboarding process. So when customers join from retail channel and they have their first digital experience, is how do you help them get through that experience as easily as possible? We've also seen a change where mobile money and non-cash payment options had already been growing in popularity for a number of years, but we've seen the number of customers opting for 100% digital payment options grow this year, faster than the non-digital options. Do we expect this transition from retail to digital to continue? I don't think that will be a one-off bubble, because once customers experience digital, there's an element of convenience, there's an element of fast transaction that customers appreciate, and they stay with it. From a customer perspective, I think you're seeing customers' expectations increasing, partly because they're coming to digital and they have other digital experiences which are not remittance led, but their expectation about wanting more control, about being able to track exactly what is going on with their process. We launched a transfer tracker app this year to allow the recipients to be able to locate their transfer in real time. There are many benefits on that, including saving the recipient from making wasted journeys to collect the cash point during the pandemic. But I think this expectation of customers has changed this year, and that is, in my opinion, something that will stay in the next few years. And then if I look at our teams, the biggest transformation, outside of like everyone working from home, etc., is our teams internally have become a lot more responsive to the reality on the ground, because the situations locally this year were changing in real time. I think it has forced, we have teams locally in most markets, and daily we had to work with our customers to help them figure out what the new reality of, and the recipient side especially, understand how that was. And so we've been working much more closely with even the regulators. We've been much more closely with our customers on the ground to update them. And I think customers will expect that going forward. So when we can talk maybe some time also later, but when the regulators in Nigeria issued new guidelines at the beginning of December to say remittance companies have to remit in US dollars, I think having learned this year to react faster, we were the first player this year to be able to offer cash pickup in US dollars and then bank transfer in US dollars. And so I think that dynamics of team being a lot more reactive is something that is very important. internally on how they work. I think the teams have learned to be more structured. I think people have, if this work from home continues, I think in general it has stiffened a little bit the brainstorming element of how people work. And so it's finding new ways to brainstorm, and it's made people a bit more tired. We introduced 3 recharge days this year in addition to employees' annual leave, and that was extremely well received internally. So a lot of changes. But I think all of those are for the better of customers and for the industry.
Okay, thank you, Sophie, for that. Matt, what's your experience been? And I know you're in Seattle, but if you look just very close to you, California is still in lockdown again. And what do you see from your perspective in North America?
Yeah, I think when COVID started to unfold in kind of March, Q1, Q2, there were 2 things that we knew would unfold, but we didn't know how. One, we had more confidence in, and that was we immediately saw a shift of new customers using our platform as people kind of traditionally went from offline to digital, which given that about half the folks on the call today are from remittance service providers, folks I think kind of intuitively know that, but our new growth tripled year over year, in kind of May of this year, which was levels that we had never seen before at that kind of scale. So that we knew, and we knew would likely continue. What we didn't know was what would happen to our base of customers. And, given that immigrants in a lot of places are kind of the hardest hit by the recession. And that, quite frankly, has been inspiring by, what has unfolded throughout the year. Our base has performed exceptionally strong. As Sophie mentioned, remittances are priority for our customers to get money home. A lot of customers who previously potentially traveled home throughout the year at various times, obviously weren't able to, or it was more difficult to. And our customers have found ways to send money back home to their families, just given how important remittances are always, but especially during a global pandemic. So our transaction volume, also grew 40% from February 2020 to March 2020. And, if you look throughout the year, the base has remained remarkably resilient. So I think that, from a customer standpoint, that's how the year has played out. Obviously, the future is unknown, but the both new customer and existing base of customers continues to look strong. I can talk more about the team and other elements about how the team's rallied to serve customers, new features we've rolled out, but it's been one that when I reflect on our customers throughout the year, I'm just incredibly inspired.
Right. Ahmed, what's your experience in one of, the second largest market really after US, Saudi? What have you seen?
We saw the COVID as a positive thing from our side as a digital platform. One is, as you know, in this market, there are, it's an oligopoly market. Few players are playing here, and some of them, they have their own digital platform, but coming up with a platform that is easy to use, platform that allowing people to send money easily without leaving their home, and during the COVID-19, this helped us to reach to a new milestone in STC Pay, and this is what we saw in starting in March, and it carried on until today. Even today in Saudi, alhamdulillah, the numbers of cases are very, very low. The government did a great job in controlling that, and we talk about less than 200 cases a day, which is almost nothing to the population. And this is where the number of transactions at that time, almost, at that time we were doing, a very good number of transactions. I don't want to disclose it, and then it doubled in 1 month time, and it carried on with the same level until today. Even the lockdown went away, and everything back to normal here in Saudi, and the people are visiting branches, but still the number of transactions are stayed at the same level and growing, to be honest. Today we launched a campaign which is to send money with almost 1 riyal in Saudi, which is almost 20 or 30 cents to the dollar. One is to encourage people to come to a digital platform and to let them try. Whoever is still going to the branches, we are trying to educate them and let them know about the digital platform. Majority of our customers today are coming from remittance, and the retention rate is extremely high. We are talking about roughly on remittance more than 85%. Whoever used our product and services will come and use it again and again. And this is a very, good indication to us. Making it easier, and Sophie just mentioned that they launched the tracker. In STC Pay, what we did is, from day one, we said, let us go back to principle. Someone wants to send money to the other party. The problem is, I don't know when this will hit, whether it's cash or account. I want to make sure that you don't need to travel or to go. And this was even before COVID, since the day of inception. And the customer does not need to enter into complication and the steps or other things that you do in the back end. And this is what we enable them. And also we notify them if it is cash, this transaction was backed or not. And this is where we see a lot of customers. In addition, if you, and as you know, there are a lot of, customer will enter certain information wrong and they want to amend it. And we enable that to them instantly. And even if you want to cancel that transaction, you can cancel it and you will get credited to your account instantly. And all of these, at that time, nobody was doing it. And until today, nobody is doing it in the market in Saudi except us. This has given us a very good push into the market. And alhamdulillah, we are growing at the same pace. We are seeing a lot of new customers are joining to do transaction using our platform. And in terms of employees or the impact of COVID on the company itself, since the inception, STC Pay, we were working from home since 2018, from day one. And this is what, nothing, impacted us in terms of employees. And this was, because you are talking about a company with almost 100 employees only. And this is not a company that has a lot of, employees that you have to go and chase and ask them to. And we did that intentionally since day one to let them come to the digital world by also working from home and feeling accountable. And this is what, alhamdulillah, makes us, differently in this market.
And I would just remind me, SAMA allows eKYC in Saudi, or is it one-time physical?
No, there is no physical visit. Alhamdulillah, in Saudi there is a Abshir system, which is MY. If you want to register, we do everything digitally. You come and you log in, you put your phone number, and then you put your ID, and we will fetch your information. You give us the permission to fetch it from Ministry of Interior, and that's it. This is your KYC. You have to fill then your information in terms of salary and other KYC. And this is run everything digitally because the infrastructure of e-government is there in Saudi. And this is what helped us to move faster in terms of digital transformation. And it's not just remittance. The platform, we don't only provide remittance, but it is a big chunk of it. And you do see it in different players in the market, whether banks to open digitally and asking people to do things. In addition, during COVID, the ACH or the system closed at a certain time in Saudi day, and we were the only company that's doing, company disbursement for delivery apps or Uber and others, and we make it faster to them, and 24/7 is working. And this is where also we saw momentum, and still growing, and because of that, they're pushing their customer to use digital mean to pay for their services.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, eKYC is still an impediment in a number of jurisdictions, and we'll come on to that. Richard, we've heard three, I guess, send side perspectives. Would be great to hear from you from a receive side perspective.
Okay. From a receive, what we can say faster, without a shadow of doubt, terminating directly to mobile wallets is the most cost-effective and efficient way of sending remittances to Africa. So what we've seen this year, faster, was instead of people sending large amounts, they're sending many, many smaller amounts, which I think is visible from Remitly's and Worldremit's, the partnership we have with them. So from MTN, what we did faster is one, we realized that to be part of this digitization, we should also be able to play a part to our customers. So we zero-rated P2P fees for the receivers first. Then we looked, what do we need to do further than that adds value to our customers? So from MTN, we have partnered with virtually everyone from major hubs. So we looked at our technology and we opened an open API system, which makes it easier to partner with everybody. So Ahmed, you're welcome to partner with me as part of the moving forward. So we made it open to everyone. MTN is about growing our partnerships and our networks. And we cannot do it without being receivers. We cannot do it without players who are based outside Africa. Then we went a step further and we developed our own, leveraging on our own brand. We realized there's a lot of African diaspora who really want to send money home, and not just money, they also want to send airtime, and there are very many other requests that they want to do. So not only did we grow our home ecosystems of what you can do with remittances, we developed a product called Homeland, not a shock, send money back home. So we have Homeland, which is based in the UK. We have done it in collaboration with one of our good partners, MFS Africa. So this platform allows Africans in the diaspora to send money back home at a cheap and effective way, based on MTN's, on our brand. And it's not competition, Sophie or Matt. It's still just collaborating with you guys. We just went over to do something that is that feels more like home for us. So from the receive side, we have done our best to also increase the ecosystem. What can I do with the money once I have it? So from payments of bills to doing merchant payments to savings and lending, we have done all that as well. That's what we did from an MTN perspective.
Got it. Great. Thank you. I think let's do a quick audience poll to get a sense of what is everybody seeing in terms of the impact of COVID on their transactions. So, Veronica, if you could please launch that. Okay. I think it gives us a sort of directional sense as to where we are, which is great. Given we have, I guess, a sort of heavily focused digital panel, I'm going to be dangerous here and play devil's advocate for a second. You know, it seems to me like everybody thinks digital is the magic pill, and there is no doubt that there is an adoption and that's accelerated. But, you know, it wasn't, the migrant wasn't waiting for COVID to happen to sort of go down this path. So, you know, as you look into, and it's great that that has happened, there's no doubt this is the way we want to go, and everybody agrees with that. But is this really I guess let me backtrack. First of all, the definition of digital sort of varies from company to company. You know, sort of, is it both legs are non-cash? Is it one leg is cash and others non-cash, and so on? And so we've seen MoneyGram, for example, declare triple-digit growth rates, sort of, I think, during the course of this entire year, for example. But if I remember right, it is, you know, if you took their pure digital, no cash on either side, from memory, I think it's less than 10%. So that's probably one thing as an industry we should try and tackle if we can get sort of at least consensus on the definition. But putting that aside, do you feel, Matt, this is a permanent shift, or do you feel that you know, as soon as things go back to normal, whatever that may be, and everything is open, and the fiscal support from the government dries up, that we're going to see the ATVs go down, we're going to see the volume go down, but we're also going to see this migration back to, I don't know, I mean, we've seen informal move to formal, for example. Is that a permanent thing? Or how do you look into 21 or perhaps 22? Do you project Remitly, you know, on the same curve as you're seeing now, for example?
Yeah, great question, Mohit. I think that there's kind of two parts to your question from what I heard. I think part of it is, what's the economic future going to look like, and are customers going to be able to have money to send home? And I think that is much harder to predict. I think that, you know, as we talked about, customers prioritize getting money back home to their family. I expect that to continue, but I think, you know, economic hardships definitely can have an impact if they're prolonged and deep. So that one I think is less certain. I think that on the shift to digital, I think that I do expect that once somebody has shifted to send money online, that will continue. And the reason I say that is because of a few points. First is, you know, I used to think that that for customers, it was about speed, it was about price. Those things matter, but ultimately the reason that COVID, 60+% of remittances were sent offline, and that number is hard to get an exact handle on. And by the way, when I am talking about digital, I'm talking about exactly that, sending money online, not receiving. We could talk about that separate, and I'm sure Richard and others would have some really good insights on that. But when we talk about sending online, what ultimately holds people back from doing it that first time is not speed and price, it is trust. And customers are sending a lot of their hard-earned money. There's a kind of, you know, habitual nature that comes with sending money in general, and going from somebody in our customers' communities that they know and trust, and at that physical agent, to a nameless, faceless digital provider where, due to compliance and risk, we have to collect a lot of personal information, and we're asking them to trust us with a significant portion of their hard-earned money to get it back to their family. That is frightening for customers. And I think that what we've learned is, once you get over that initial trust hurdle, you deliver a great service, customers come back again and again and again. And I think COVID was, as you mentioned, things were already shifting digital, but it really accelerated that, as Sophie said, pulled forward that shift by several years. But what we've seen is, once that shift occurs, I think it is very sustainable long-term. People trust it and come back and use it again and again. And they are then looking at some of those features like speed, price, and those things we obviously deliver in an exceptional way, as do, I think, other digital money transmitters. So that's one data point. The other quick data point I'll say is, given, as you mentioned, COVID in various parts of the country has had different impacts, and things have opened up, things have closed down, especially you take Europe as an example, the US. And as those things have happened, we haven't seen the kind of retention rates and usage shift back. We've seen very predictable behavior like we would have seen pre-COVID for somebody that's trusted a digital provider and continues to use it. So I think that digital is here for the long term. I think the economic component is what I think about, and whether or not that's going to impact our customers in the years to come.
No, I agree with that, Matt. And I think, Sophie, obviously welcome your input to the same question. But in particular, the point, Matt, you just mentioned in terms of trust. I mean, in some ways, you know, I feel we as an industry perhaps ought to do more about digital literacy, right? Because, you know, everybody sort of makes the analogy of, well, all these migrants are using phone and WhatsApp to call home, but calling home is not the same as sending money home. Those are two very, very different exercises, both emotionally and financially and so on. And so I mean, should we be doing more to educate people to make sure this really is a permanent shift rather than a temporary one?
I think so. You know, in the first question that you were asking, you were saying, what are some of the changes that this year has triggered? And our ability to bring people along with that digital journey, which is quite different from a retail journey or a physical journey. It has a lot of the same steps, but it's digital. People have to trust you. People have to understand what are the expectations even before they start the process. And so that ability to get people on board, explain to them what are the expectations, both on how they can send money and also how their recipient will be able to receive the money, and do that in a, you know, digital, sometimes you only have 3 or 4 steps. And so how do you tailor that experience so the customer is actually as guided as possible through that through that experience is very important. So I very much agree with Matt. There's this onboarding of getting customers to trust it. Then once they have gone through that journey, there's a lot of convenience from being digital. You have lower transaction costs. You were talking about pricing, but you see some of the players that do both dual retail and digital experiences, they end up offering cheaper solutions for digital than they do in retail. That's attractive for customers. How high could it go? It's hard to predict. If you look at China, ironically, that's the country that introduced the world to banknotes and is now spearheading the digital payment revolution. But 80% of Chinese citizens today use digital payments as opposed to cash. It's one of the largest mobile payment markets. So you can see a trend there where a lot of customers end up using digital payment, but I do think it will depend on the reality of each country where the recipient receives the money from a payout perspective. We see there are economies that are, because of the regulatory framework that they have put around mobile money, some countries have embraced mobile money, some customers have embraced mobile money a lot more than others. You look at the trends in Kenya and you look at the trend in Nigeria, it's a very different behavior of customers because of how mobile money has been structured. In Zimbabwe, there's a lot more cash pickup. So I think you have to, every economy, depending on the reality on the ground and the regulations around it, have MNOs been allowed to become money holders, yes or no, and do they have to do that with a joint venture or not? And that makes it more or less easy for entire countries to, on the recipient side, to go digital or not.
Right, right. And Ahmed, I mean, you're part of STC, which is, the largest telco company, and not only in Saudi, but across GCC. And then you're also in a country that has been historically very cash focused, right? So what has your experience been in terms of this digital adoption? And do you feel this is sticky, as Matt and Sophie, I think, seem to certainly think so?
I totally agree with them. And also, even if we are part of STC, trust is very important. STC is a telco company, and we just introduced something to deal with cash and something to deal with money. And you have to come to the customer with, something to trust, because I am sending money. I'm not using it for a call, or I'm not using it for to send an SMS or to call someone. This is the real difference once it comes to the remittance. Now, Saudi has a vision laid down by the Crown Prince called Vision 2030, and one element in there is the FSDB, Financial Service Development Program, and this was introduced almost 2017 to push the ecosystem to be cashless society. And this is where a lot of players are coming in to introduce digital services, not only for remittance, including services with the government. And the minute that you have a base of a government that has a very robust infrastructure in terms of e-government, this will enable you, because even if the expats or the worker here in Saudi, anybody, whether Saudi or non-Saudi, you have to use that platform for any service that you want. Then those guys, by nature, though, they will be digitally, educated. So now this is one. The second thing is the young generation here is also supporting the transformation itself. We're talking about 70% below the age of 30. And this is by itself. Those guys are using YouTube. Those guys are, born or raised during the internet age. So they know how to use things. And I'll go back to also, Sophie, at the beginning, she said, they are now demanding more and different experience. And this is a very important thing, because also those guys are coming with us to Saudi, and they are working here, and they want to send money back to their family, they want a different services. They want more product and services that support them. It's not just only remittance. I want to pay my bill. And we saw a different also thing with digital, usually, because, you know, previously you have to wait in line. I have to stay 2-3 hours because there are a few players, and I have to wait until the end of the month and then I send my money together, or I wait 2-3 months. Now what we are seeing is some of them will send fraction of this amount every week or every 2 weeks. Now we are seeing them sending more than they usually send. So this is you know, I think, you know, the digital is here to stay, and we saw it not just because you're talking about a country that, you know, the cases are very low today, and this is and the customer are growing. And by the way, the fastest growing month for us is nowadays on December, and it is not, you know, in you know, remittance in Saudi, usually the month of Ramadan, or this is where you see you know, the highest growth or the highest number of transactions on a daily basis. We are seeing it today on December, and this is where the country is fully open. You can go, you can visit branches, you can do whatever you want, and still there are a very good number of customers are using it. So digital, you know, we are as STC Bay fully based on digital. We don't intend to introduce anything on you know, offline. Everything will be digitally, and we base this company based on that direction, and we think that, you know, digital is here to grow.
Okay, thank you. Richard, from a receipt perspective, what's driving the growth from your perspective, away from the traditional cash to more towards mobile wallets?
I think we have really done a lot in expanding what we offer. And there's a lot of more customer trust of the service, that your money is safe, it's secure, and you can do a lot more with it. So that has really driven the digital story. Also, the fact that there are lockdowns and you could not really cash out, that has really driven it as well. And companies themselves focusing on digital. Even the traditional guys, the Western Unions and the MoneyGrams, have really pushed their focus on the digital. So all these combined factors have really increased the digital uptake. Also, nobody ever thanks the regulators, but many regulators are coming around slowly to realize the need to be behind this story. I can tell you in the last 3 years, I've seen changes because, like, I can give from an MTN perspective, I have to deal with almost 12 different regulators who have 12 different ways of looking at remittances coming back into Africa, from some wanting to partner with banks, some allowing us to hold the wallet ourselves. So the KYC requirements as well, the limits for the remittances, I can see a lot of collaboration. I don't think it's enough, but I think some of those factors, I think, are helping the digital story in terms of the receive side perspective.
Allow me, Mohit, to say one thing, which is,
Please.
you know, Richard, you said the traditional, like, you know, Western Union, and
Yeah.
we as STC Bay, we are using the rail of Western Union, not just because they are a shareholder now with us, but it is true that they, you know, they enable us in terms of sending money. We are using their product as a white label, and this was, you know, I think, you know, we were on the first to try it with them, and it was a very different product by all means, and it helped us to reach to a different milestone by providing that. And I think, you know, everybody, as you mentioned, is moving to digital.
Yeah. So like that, that was not there before. Eh? That's why I can see you smiling. It's one of those things that has changed with the given dynamic. And I'm
Definitely.
happy.
I think $200 million always helps, Ahmed, right?
Yes. and by the way, it is the first unicorn in the kingdom and the first fintech unicorn in the Middle East.
Congratulations on that.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Thank you.
Matt, just quick come back to you. I mean, are you also, I'm interested, as I'm sure everybody is, to hear a bit about your passbook product, because have you had the experience of providing a holistic proposition, which is far more than remittances, has also helped you in terms of both financial inclusion and then migration to digital?
Yeah, I think with Passbook, and it cut out for about just a few seconds of your question, but I think the heart of your question, Mohit, was just around Passbook and how that's going. Is that right?
Yeah, and if that's actually, and providing that, you know, holistic proposition in terms of not just remittances, but basically a fully functioning account, has that also helped you accelerate the digital and financial inclusion adoption?
Yeah, so Passbook was born out of a couple things. One, the fact that you know, with our vision around building the most trusted financial services, we recognize that, you know, we have trust with the sizable customer base now. And the second is we asked our customers what other pain points they had, and in the U.S. context, you know, it's painful to get a bank account as an immigrant. Bank accounts don't serve immigrants very well, specifically with their needs. And so it's early days with Passbook, but I think it's certainly, to your financial inclusion point, Mohit, a key part of our vision, a key part of what customers in our segment need. And we're really excited about the future of that product.
Great. Sophie, just a quick one. I know customer acquisition costs, you know, was always a big challenge for digital players. And you know, it sort of, I remember in the days of Zoom, giving my age away now, but you know, it was anywhere up to $100. I mean, with COVID, I would have thought that would have come right down.
So with COVID, what you've seen is you've had more demand of customers coming looking for digital solutions, and you also see the cost of media in certain channels having come down, but it was not even at all. So you saw some channels becoming more expensive, you saw some channels becoming less expensive, and it was mostly for, I think, any of our marketing team finding out what are the right channels, given how the market is moving, to find to be able to be in front of those new customers as they were searching for who would they be able to work with in remittance. But not all channels behave the same way.
Right, right. Let's do one quick poll on digital, Veronica, and see what the audience thinks in terms of what percentage of their transactions are likely to be digital. And if most of the audience consists of Worldremit and Remitly teams, then I know what the answer will be. Okay, more than 60%. Think in the next 3 to 6 months, more than 60% of the transactions would be expected to be digital, is the highest so far. Just give it a minute till we get just over 50% response. Okay, I think we can, we've got a direction. So 50% of the audience thinks that more than 60% of the transactions will be digital in the next 3 to 6 months. And we have a 19% on the other side, which is under 20%. That's interesting. Great. Thank you for that. Let's move on to another topic. More, I sort of want to look at the landscape. As we look at the remittance landscape, I'm curious that despite all the challenges in COVID, we've seen, and we continue to see, M&A transactions happen. And so, Sophie, I'd love to start with you first and hear, obviously you did this deal, you bought this company very cheaply. We all know the numbers. I say that tongue in cheek, but would love to hear from you, you know, right in the middle of this pandemic when most people were focused on cutting costs and looking at, you obviously went down the route of a pretty significant acquisition. So a little bit about that, but just generally your view also in terms of how you see the landscape changing in terms of where we are with the remittance industry as perhaps you look into 21.
Yeah. These are a good question. And actually, when I came to this industry, the first in the first place, and you look across the industry, it's actually surprising to me that there isn't more consolidation. It's quite a fragmented industry, and most companies have gone quite broad in their coverage and their offering. And you're starting to see companies that are going deeper in particular corridors or customer segments. So you see a lot of new entrants with quite a narrow focus and wondering how they're going to expand beyond that. So that fragmentation of the industry, in my opinion, coupled with the fact that payment to a large extent is a volume game. If you want to lower the costs, volume is a really strong lever for that. So I would expect across the industry, I would have expected to see more consolidation, and I would expect more across the industry at that point. And it's both for remittance, the way we're talking about it right now, but also thinking more broadly, and Ahmed will probably have a perspective on that. But there's also areas of expansion into, if you look at new tech investments, if you look at industries beyond remittance, they would be more keen to go into more tech investments, new services. You think Pakistan, Zimbabwe, individuals get their health insurance through mobile money. There are lots of services now that you can go and get digitally. And so I would expect in the coming years to see across the board in the industry a lot more of that activity.
Okay. Matt, your perspective, you've clearly been very successful and with the investor community. What's the sentiment that you see in the current times? Are they as bullish as ever on the industry?
Yeah, I think that the answer to that is yes, and I think that given the acceleration to digital, that excitement has increased. I think that what's interesting, again, lesson I've learned slowly over the last 9 years is the fact that remittances are incredibly complex to do in a reliable, frictionless, seamless way. I think a lot of folks outside the industry think that it's very easy to get money from point A to point B because it's money and not like a package or something, if you were to draw an analogy to something like Amazon. And the reason I mention that is because I think scale really matters to be able to have the amount of capital needed to be able to build not only a best-in-class front-end digital product, but to build the right risk systems, to build the right disbursement network, to build the kind of end-to-end vertical stack that's needed to provide a phenomenal remittance service. And so I think when you look at whether it's consolidation in the industry, investor sentiment, what I'd say is that what has evolved for us specifically, and where I think there's been increasing education, is scale is important to be able to have the capital to invest in all those things that I mentioned. And I think there's been a breakout of a few companies that have gotten to that scale and kind of escape velocity, not only to be able to do that, but to build a sustainable, profitable business over time. So I think that that's the way that it'll continue, is companies that reach that certain scale and size, I think will get more kind of excitement given the dynamics that I just mentioned.
But do you, I mean, like Sophie, I've been in this industry way too long, but like you, I've continued to be amazed why there is not more consolidation, just given the various matrices, drivers and so on. Matt, do you feel that we're going to see more consolidation and maybe mergers between the players, or is it more from the outside that we may see somebody coming in for and acquiring some of the current incumbents?
Yeah, I do think there'll be increasing consolidation. I mean, you mentioned the Worldremit Sendwave, acquisition, and I think that's one example. I think that they'll continue to be with the scale point that I mentioned. I think that they'll continue to be larger players in the space for the reasons that I mentioned.
Ahmed, Western Union's, I think, first minority investment, as far as I can remember, at a pretty significant valuation, as we talked about. I mean, love to see how your perspective on what drove Western Union into that and how you see that partnership. I mean, STC didn't need money, I'm sure, so it was more than just financial. But love to hear from you on that.
Definitely. Well, Western Union started with us since the inception. It was, one of the first products that, we were offering at the beginning. and they saw the growth, and they were with us through all the steps. And this is why they also feel that there are a lot of room to grow, and this is what we also believe, because the market is changing, the country is evolving, and also we are expanding in different markets, especially in GCC. And this is where also, in our strategy, we follow the money, we follow where is the customer that, will demand our product and services, and we will go from Saudi to those markets. Coming at this valuation, they see the growth that, we are having today and the potential growth. This gives you confidence on the industry, the remittance, and gives a lot of also trust on because we are the first mobile wallet, the first fintech in the kingdom. So this is where also brings this will bring a lot of confidence to the market, and this is where I do see a lot of players will go and acquire whether companies that is fully digital, that will enhance them and will give them the scalability to reach whether different customers, or companies that will consolidate to provide different corridors or different way of payments, whether it is to account-based network or to the cash or to the mobile wallets in the future. The business still growing, and especially in markets like the Middle East, where a lot of in the GCC, where you see Saudi, Bahrain, Kuwait, and UAE, and also Qatar collectively will be the largest money transfer sending country. So this is where I think you'll see a lot of players coming in with different, and we saw TransferWise are coming to UAE, and they are launching their services there, and I think you'll see different players from overseas to come and try to offer their product and services from this market.
Right. Richard, from a telco perspective, I mean, we in the industry have always sort of looked and said telcos in some ways would make the ideal choice, right, to acquire a remittance company. I mean, you have the customer base, you have the data, you're moving into mobile money, you certainly have the money, but yet no telco has really come in and done any major acquisition. Is it regulatory that's the impediment? What stops you guys doing it?
Okay, we're doing two things. Our focus first is on interoperability with the existing telcos first, before we start buying each other and expanding. So MTN first is we will expand to other African countries that we find more lucrative to offer mobile money as well. But also what we have done, we're focused with the other telcos in terms of interoperability within ourselves to really long-term drive the cost down for remittances and for normal P2P transactions. So like what we have done as MTN, we partnered with Orange currently, and we came up with Mowali. It's an agnostic interoperable platform that we're looking at long-term, having more players from Vodacom Group, from Tigo, Milcom, Airtel, to have everybody come and join in for us to look at it in a long-term view as MNOs of what we can do to offer a better value proposition to the customers across the continent. So from an MNO perspective, we are not really buying other MTOs, but we're more or less looking at it from an interoperable perspective and see how we can also merge our synergies and have a long-term outlook towards this.
So you're not going to use your checkbook yet, Richard?
No, not yet. I'm not buying Worldremit next week. If she's offering it.
Well, if that deal happens, IAMTN wants a commission, just so. But I've always had a very simple view over the years, which is everybody that's in wants to get out, and everybody that's out wants to get in. Which will drive the discussion, which is great. Look, as long as there is movement, it's good for the industry. Very quickly, I know we're over an hour, but we still have almost close to 100 participants. So thank you for hanging in there. I want to cover just one last topic with the panel, which is, you know, one of the great things that I saw in COVID as a sort of positive for the industry was the sort of focus that remittances got from the governments, from United Nations, from World Bank, from regulators, you know, everybody trying to help to see how we could, you know, keep the flow of money. And that was great. And I think things that ordinarily might have taken months and years and so on for to happen, there were a lot of things, whether it was increasing mobile limits, you know, mobile money limits, whether it was eKYC and so on, that happened. So, and as I said, number of initiatives, very successful by call to action by Suez and UK government, the IFAD initiative that IAMTN is participating in both of those to represent the industry. I'm really interested to hear from all of you as to what more do you think could be done, you know, in terms of this private-public partnership, which I think is very important to also tackle some key issues like de-risking, which, you know, continues to impact, maybe less so the digital side, but I don't think anybody is really immune from it. So Matt, maybe you could kick us off in terms of your thoughts on that.
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind for me is, you know, something that Richard mentioned earlier, and that is that regulators oftentimes don't get thanked when they encourage and support innovation. And I don't mean thanked by the entities that they regulate, but I think that we need to shift the narrative and really celebrate regulators that are, you know, set up innovation or sandboxes that encourage innovation in the space, which ultimately is good for customers in the long term, but is maybe not as core to their, you know, specific anti-money laundering, combating financial terrorism goals. I think that in the long term, that is also true because as we hear from our regulators, digital origination is so much more controlled and decreases some risk. But I think that the punchline for me is how do we, and this is our approach with regulators, is one of partnership, respect, and from an industry standpoint, not specific regulator standpoint, trying to highlight and celebrate the regulators that are encouraging innovation, because they're a big part of the ecosystem of where innovation succeeds, and we need to celebrate the ones that have set up the right structures and done that. And I think that's incumbent on the industry as much to do that, and that's the punchline from me.
Great, Sophie, your thoughts on this topic?
Very similar. I do think this is it's a partnership with regulators, and I think I don't have enough history to, but this year you've seen because the situation on the ground was changing so quickly with COVID, and customers could do certain things, couldn't do other things, and lockdowns. You've seen regulators reach out, I think, to the industry to get more of the customer perspective. What is going on? What are you seeing? How can we support? And we've been working quite proactively with regulators in different countries to say, this is what we're seeing, this is where the customers are being stuck, and things like what you're talking about. It's the industry, it's the transaction limit. It's making it easier for the customer in the end, so that on the recipient side, it remains a regulated, compliant transaction, but it is not an obstacle course every time you're receiving money. And so it's working with the regulators to help unblock some of those friction points, especially on the recipient side, I think, and continuing that that dialogue. But I have to say, we've worked very closely with the regulators this year, and we have found them we found them open to having those discussions about the customer perspective and how they can evolve some of the friction points and support that across the industry.
Yeah, I think we also experienced that there was this real proactiveness from the public sector to really work with the industry, which is great. And Richard, I assume, I mean, you obviously deal with multiple regulators given your presence across Africa. Did you feel that their behavior was different, better, indifferent? What was your experience?
It varies. They're seasonal. Let me be honest. Like the regulator in Nigeria has woken up and has a raft of regulations. I think, Sophie, I think you're the only one who has complied so far. So
You what?
you're the one who has complied so far. You're the quickest to comply. But the regulators keep on changing stuff, like in Nigeria, where now you have to pay out in dollars. What we have seen with regulators is they like playing it safe. They want to really understand it. Sometimes there's a lot of copy and paste, which we have tried to, to bring them to terms that some things don't exist. Like I'll give you obvious fields that give regulators safety. They want to know the address of the recipient. They want to know their ID number, ID type. I mean, they can give you like 6 or 7 things that basically when you go through Africa, some of these things really do not exist. I know it sounds crazy, but it doesn't exist in terms of being able to provide such data. So what we have seen from regulators, it's a touch and go. It depends what's happening in the world. Now everyone is pro-digital, so there's a lot of regulatory push to grow it. But when something else changes, we've seen regulators shift their positions. And I think where we're evolving to is like what Matt mentioned, to passbooks, where we would want to have eKYC that is widely acceptable across the board. So that's what we're trying to push from an MNO perspective, where it can be I'm lacking the word, a more consistent way of identifying customers and moving on.
Sophie, just to clarify, when he said you were the quickest to complain, he meant that as a compliment in terms of Nigeria.
To comply.
Comply, yeah.
Comply.
Comply, yes. She was the quickest.
The look on your face was, so I just
I thought I heard complain at first.
Yes.
And
No,
I was like, we were the
complain.
first to comply.
Comply, yes.
Yes.
Not complain.
Sorry, Richard?
No, not complain. If Sophie were complaining, I would not say complain.
Comply. Ahmed, SAMA obviously is your main regulator, and I'm sure you have great access to them. Did you see, but they're a tough regulator in terms of trying to get stuff done. What was your experience this year?
It is, very great, the experience in terms of support, because if without SAMA support, STC Bay will not be exist. We started the sandbox, and we were the first with a couple of companies to enter. They were giving us the room to practice and do with family, friends, with a limited number of users, and they were taking us through that journey. We both learning, and even the regulator is trying to make sure that we comply with the rules and regulation without jeopardizing the rules that are in place. And during COVID is one thing, the wallet limit was 5,000. They increased it to 20,000, and this was the first thing. The second thing, they also waived the fees of transferring locally to zero. And this is where you see the regulator is giving you all the support it needs. The AKYC is one thing that is also giving the permission to banks to open bank accounts, not only for individuals, even for companies. So this is where you see a lot of players are coming in, a lot of number of players currently in the sandbox. Very companies being graduated, and they are providing different products and services. This is to show where SAMA is also taking the lead in the region by allowing different players to come and practice and do a lot of activities. And again, I echo my colleagues here, and the SAMA and the regulators are during COVID were differently. And talking about SAMA in particular, since the day of inception, the sandbox was a very great thing for us to move. And today we are also moving to a different era with them, where now you have the Electronic Money Institute license, and you have different regulation for it. And we are also working with them to improve and grow and become a digital bank one day. So this is, this kind of support, and Mohit, Sama very well, and the how tough they are in terms of regulations, and they are not, like any other regulator, but they are very, very supportive.
Right. Normally, I don't allow questions, but given Veronica is controlling the Zoom controls, she's asked me that she wants to ask a question. So, Veronica, over to you.
Thank you. I'm glad you allowed me this time. Now, during the last week, I've been having a lot of round meetings. I mean, Sophie knows because sometimes we've been discussing especially about these things, and I saw Sophie in some of the meetings, Richard as well, where everyone is pushing for digitalization. We were talking about the roadmap from the G20 and everything like that. So suddenly we came to something that Sophie mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, and is Nigeria. So suddenly we come to this, that this circular came at the end of November, and where it was not very clear how to start, but the remittance operators adapted and tried to do it the way they could. But I would like to understand exactly I've been talking to many of the remittance service providers providing services to Nigeria. I would like to understand how exactly is, if you can tell me, how is affecting these changes to the operation, because in some cases, wallet have been suffering more than some remittance services providers. Some remittance services provider also had to suddenly rearrange the whole process, and some others have it in a different way. It depends also how you partner, and I would like to have the view of the four of you, how are transactions to Nigeria going, because it's an important corridor in Africa. You won't allow me any more questions, I know.
No, this was, sorry, who did you want to answer this?
There's four of them.
Oh, okay. Sophie, over to you.
Sure, I think it's quite a recent change, so it's very difficult still to see how this will play out. The change, to be clear, is so the central bank of Nigeria asked the remittance companies that the recipient receive money in Nigeria in US dollars and not in Naira. Operationally, I'm sure, depending on how everyone is set up, the operational changes will vary by player. For us, what that meant is we, as quickly as we could, turned off the ability for customers to send money in Nairas into the country, and then work with our partners on the ground in Nigeria to be able to distribute US dollars to recipients. So that if you're sending money to Nigeria from anywhere in the world, when a recipient goes to collect the money, the first one that we were able to bring to market was cash pickup. And so this is customers going to the cash pickup location and collecting actual dollars, which the retailers, the banks, it's usually a bank pickup place, are getting directly, and then gradually allowing also for bank transfers. It's not an easy transformation, because you're asking recipients it's a very different experience for the recipient. So there's a fair amount of hand-holding of customers sending money and recipient receiving the money to explain to them, this is how it works now, this is how you're going to have to do it, these are some of the limitation in the market that you're going to have to live with while the market moves to a USD remittance. So it's a fair amount of operational change internally to make that happen. There were a lot of long nights. For the teams.
It's affecting the cost as well.
Affecting the cost.
Suddenly you need to start, I mean, you have more operations, so that means that suddenly you need to start also probably dealing with more banks than before, because some of the cases I saw is that now you have to have direct agreements with each bank, isn't it, to do the payout?
Yes, and I think because it came from the central bank, the central bank has been working with the banks. And so by the time we were working with the banks, they already knew what they had to do. They didn't always know how they would do it and how long it would take them. So it's been a journey for everyone, both on the partner side in Nigeria. And some of the banks were ready faster than others. Some of them had operational, the Nigerian economy had US dollar in fair amount of circulation between 2002 and 2013. So depending on their history also there, they were able to turn back on a US dollar faster or slower. But it is a massive transformation for any of the operators along the chain. Matt was saying earlier, it is complex to do an international money transfer end to end. And so you have to make sure that all the steps along the way are working out.
Matt,
and there's still some work to do.
Right. Thanks, Sophie. Matt, anything you want to add to that?
I think Sophie captured it exceptionally well. So I just, +1 on the operational complexity is really what it was all about to make that shift, and then the customer education around that. But I think she captured it really well. So I just +1 what she said.
Great. Ahmed, I'm not sure, it's a big corridor out of Saudi, so I'm not sure you're really impacted by this new.
No, it's not a big corridor from Saudi.
Right. Great. Well, thank you. We could carry on talking for hours and days, because it's difficult to get such an esteemed panel together, and I could talk about remittances forever, but I think we'll bring it to an end. But I want to thank all the attendees. I want to thank our panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your valuable time. I know it's early for you, Matt, and late for everybody, so I really appreciate making the accommodation. This has been a very tough year for everyone, and I think, never ever has remittance companies played such a crucial role in terms of connecting the families and making sure that money flows. So hats off to all of you guys that are making that happen. On a wider note, we would love your feedback, whether it's on webinar, whether it's on wider industry issues. So please send that to Veronica and the team at IAMTN. The recording of this webinar will be available in a day or so on the website. And apologies, I tried to bring in some of the questions, but not all of those were answered. So we'll try and see how we can get some of those answers back to you. So thank you to everybody, and stay safe, and look forward to seeing you all next year. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.